falling apart. There's a war here, terrible environmental disaster there. Everybody hates each other, and you get kind of depressed.
Over the last couple of generations, a lot has changed. When
I guess you have something to go forward to, is that you get used to it.
my great-grandmother was my age in the 1930s, the average lifespan in my country, Sweden, was 62. Today, it's 83. Out of 1,000 children born, 77 died before the age of 5. Today, that number is 2. Back then, there were 17 persons per car. Today, there are 2 persons per car in Sweden. Back then, 1% of adults had a university degree. Today, it's 26%. And of course,
That's a good improvement. But the reality is that most people will never have access to great education. So you need, like, even YouTube to pick up the slack, and AI to pick up the slack, and self-taught to pick up the slack. Because your local education that you have access to is probably not gonna be top tier. And if you're ambitious, you're especially gonna hate school because it's not the most efficient way to learn. It basically goes at the speed of the slowest student. So not great. I'm not hating on education here. If you're a teacher, the main thing you can teach to students is to love learning.
society's productivity as measured by the GDP per capita has increased massively.
So the grand narrative now is that all of this development, all of this progress is due to global capitalism, and the best thing we can do is just to let it be and maybe do a few adjustments in the margin.
This is Roland
Yeah, that would not be good. You gotta keep in mind capitalism also had like 5-year-old minors, so if anything, we need more social programs, more regulations, and also personally I'm bullish on robot socialism. Let's go.
Paulsen, author and associate professor of sociology at Lund University. I sat down with him to speak about what he calls the greatest mystery in medicine and social science right now. But first, we talked about the conventional narrative around growth that you often hear from people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett.
I mean, this is the best time to be alive in the history of the world. I mean, in terms of medicine, transportation, entertainment, you name it, or just in terms of aggregate wealth. Now,
If you can afford it.
the distribution has gotten more and more skewed in recent years, and it should be skewed to quite a degree.
Should it be skewed though? We probably wouldn't be saying this if it was the guy picking up plastic bottles in Africa. So yeah, you know, man is a rational animal. They rationalize what they like, and they believe in what they will. Obviously, he's arguing for his interest.
It's never been healthier, it's never been wealthier. We have better houses, better cars, tractors.
And people cannot differentiate, usually. You can see this a lot. That people cannot differentiate from abstract good and the good that is good for them. That's coming from their head, yeah? Because say I like a movie, and I say that movie is good. Then I just project what I like as good, right? But it's not really true. And it's kind of silly. It's like, oh yeah, you know, me having the most money is obviously the good thing. Because like, that's just kind of what they like. That is their interest. All right. The thing is, these people are also top 1%ers in the richest country. So their perspective is kind of special.
This is a narrative that suits everyone who is currently becoming rich at others' expense. And I think the question we should ask now is, what is a good life? Despite all these improvements, which are very real in material conditions, why are we not feeling better?
Even if they did not get rich at others' expense, right? Suppose. Should they not care at all? Would you not care at all? Let's say you had like $1 trillion, just yourself. It's like, wow, you know, next step, make 2 trillion.
This is me and my friends from law school some 15 years ago. I didn't have a lot of money back then, but the funny thing is that I remember feeling that my life was still rich. I was surrounded by friends and I spent my days learning stuff. I later graduated and I started earning money, but did that money make me happier?
Yeah, man. It must be a Swedish thing. I think it was like existential crisis all the way for most people. Also, like, this could be the style today as well for the newer generations.
I'm not that sure.
So according to all the survey material we have, there is a positive correlation between economic growth and happiness. But that correlation only seems to exist up until a certain level. After that level, the correlation flattens out. And in Sweden and in many other OECD nations, we reached that level already in the 1950s.
Yeah, that makes sense. History would be the history of farming. Some guy would be farming, has a wife, has kids, owns the house, and owns the means of production, owns the land, right? They can live. Unless, well, their main concern would be other crazy people, but that's pretty much it. They don't have to worry about that much. And that would be a rarity, such a luxury compared to what most people have, right? I mean, do you have a partner? Maybe. Do you have like a lot of kids? Probably not. Do you own your own shelter? But just outright? Probably not. Also, do you own the way you can make money? That's also probably not. That would be the biggest rarity these days. That most people just have jobs, which is essentially you spend like 20 years just to try to appeal to someone who basically hires the person who they can exploit the most. And that's what a job is. But also there's no security in it. So unlike a person who's like, yeah, I got my field right here. I can work, not a problem. I feel secure, but like you might not feel secure if you have a job, right? Especially with like AI taking the jobs and then what if you lose your job? What a dumb system.
To explain.
History is truly the history of farming, right? Some guy just farming for like, that's it.
If you draw scale from poor to rich and from unhappy to happy,
Of course you can exploit them, but assuming they're just on their own,
our country is, the more its happiness is
they're
affected
pretty
by a
happy with
small
that.
increase in wealth. That's why the graph increases steeply in the beginning. But when wealth reaches a certain level, the connection between additional money and happiness seems to disappear. In other words, at a certain level, more wealth doesn't make the country that much happier. I believe that
And the main reason you would need more money in capitalism because it is the way you gain security, right? The floor is lava, you know this, and by getting more and more and more, you get farther away from it. You're not gonna be the homeless guy who's gonna be begging for scraps at the corner of the supermarket, whose probably life expectancy is 4 months. That's not gonna be you, but it could be you, and no one's gonna care it's gonna be you. They're gonna be like, oh my god, die somewhere else.
this finding is more profound than I think that most people realize. Not only for countries, but also for us as individuals. There are some people, though, such as the influential author and cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker, who seems to claim that more wealth essentially always leads to more happiness. But to find support for that argument, they need to use some statistical alchemy. If you take this graph we just looked at and we make the income scale logarithmic, then yes, the flattening effect isn't that clear, and it seems like happiness always increases.
They could just say he misrepresented the stats with statistics.
In Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, a book that Bill Gates has called his favorite book of all time, Steven Pinker uses a logarithmic income scale. But in my mind, using a logarithmic income scale makes a graph like this completely misleading. And I start to wonder, why is Steven Pinker, Bill Gates, and others like them so willing to use statistical tricks to make it look like wealth always leads to more happiness?
Well, it's hard to say, because they could be just faking, but Bill Gates might just believe in what he likes. Also, Steven Pinker kind of writes two kinds of books, at least based on the ones I've read. Is that one would be his expertise. I guess that's fine. It could be a little dry, but fair enough. The second would be a highly motivated thesis, is like 500, 600 pages long, of just trying to hammer in the point that he was hell-bent from the very start. So he not like looked at the data and came to the conclusion after. No, he started with the conclusion and found the data for it. That's pretty much a Pinker book. At least most of them, as I can tell. Or you can just look at the reviews, I suppose.
Well, I think there are political reasons for that. It's all about just saying, let's go on with the same type of society. Let's just keep everything moving faster and faster, and we'll become happier and happier.
Yeah, but will more make you happy? Will more give you peace? Because when it comes to religions and philosophies, they don't really share this idea. Many philosophies and religions are okay, maybe okay, well, sure, have food and shelter and maybe a family, but otherwise, you need to slow down, just appreciate what you have, don't be haunted by various ideas, just kind of relax. Now, you can argue this is pathetic. It's all about dominating the world. It's all about ambition. Sure, but it's also not really coming from ambition. It's coming from insecurity. Right? You don't feel secure in capitalism, I suppose. Ambition would be, pure ambition would be it's okay to fail. In a way, you're just shooting for more, and it's okay if you fall a little bit lower.
I openly admit to having battled depression and anxiety, and I think a lot of people do. I have problems with depression and anxiety, and I found it difficult for me to be me. I probably had at least half a dozen depression spells that I've gone through. I was all over the place mentally. Every time I had to put on a suit and tie and having to do the role, I was in a fight or flight mode, panic attacks, severe anxiety. Talking openly about mental health problems.
I bet it's worth saying that if you have it good, then your mental health is generally better. But also, if you're in a mindset of like more and more and more, especially like in the realm of business, then they're just trying to sabotage you constantly. So yeah, you will not have peace. You might have money though.
has become common. But not only among celebrities, also in my own circles, I have several friends who have struggled with depression, and many of the colleagues that I've met throughout my career have experienced the horrors of burnout. Does this indicate that there is an actual ongoing increase in mental health problems, or is it just that we're more open about them today? Let's look at what the data says.
So we know from mass media, it's being reported all the times, that we see increases in the consumption of, say, psychiatric drugs. In Sweden and in the US, around a sixth of the population is taking some kind of psychiatric drugs. In the US, if we just look at middle-aged women, it's around a fourth who are taking...
I think this is very loaded though, because I'm all for psychiatry, psychology when it is a psychological problem. But if it's a different problem that is causing psychological problems, then I'm a bit more skeptical. Then I'm not so much. Because like, okay, let's say that you are depressed because you're poor, right? Or you live in poverty. It's like, okay, well, we can't help you with that, but we're gonna medicate you. So maybe you are less depressed, perhaps. You like living in poverty, or you're the kid who like, oh yeah, I have ADHD, or you just don't pay attention to class and like, okay, we diagnose you with ADHD. Again, you're gonna get medicated. So that's not so great. My point is that if they have real other problems, that should be fixed. If they have psychological problems, then sure, fix that, okay, or medicate that if needed. But we pretty much live in a system where there are systematic issues, but that we just don't want to fix because it benefits some people, and those who get screwed by it, they're like, okay, you're wrong. You should be medicated and stand back in line.
Some type of antidepressants. We also know that the number of people who are getting some kind of psychiatric diagnosis are dramatically increasing. That we know, but when we talk about the levels of mental health problems in epidemiology and sociology, we are not relying so much on those numbers because they can be affected by all sorts of things. What we rely on is large surveys where you ask identical questions regarding how people feel and see changes over time. The gold standard is the World Mental Health Survey, which is organized by the World Health Organization. They use representative samples, they interview hundreds of thousands of people. The interviews are very long, they can last...
Oh, but it's worth saying that capitalism is not necessarily a winner. You only see the first world countries, but you might not be thinking of other capitalist countries that are poor, right? And they are not getting much richer. They are the ones where everyone works for like $1 a day, and they just get dominated and exploited as much as possible. That's capitalism too.
Several hours and be performed on several occasions with the same individual. The World Mental Health Survey is really the most reliable source we have when talking about the actual distribution of mental health problems.
So I printed the most recent report from the World Mental Health Survey, and it strikes me that almost daily the news reports about GDP growth, stock market fluctuations, etc., but we almost never hear about the remarkable results that you can read in this report.
If we look at a single diagnosis like
Because people don't care, right?
depression, we've seen a global increase with 20% in just 10 years. And if we look at the richest nations and how many would qualify to the most common psychiatric diagnosis, and here I would include depression, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder. In the UK, in the US, and in Australia, it's around 1 in 4 who...
Yeah, I'm gonna make a very strong claim here that this is all by design. In order for someone to accept their place, you need to destroy them. And it's gotta be like some kind of learned helplessness, depression, whatever, right? For someone to accept their place as the lifelong wage slave, you need to destroy them. And that is kind of what we see.
Who would qualify for any of those diagnoses. And in Canada and France, it's around 1 in 5. 1990,
Yeah.
it's around...
So the most individualist countries have it the worst. No doubt in these, well, I guess we have Canada too. But yeah, most individualist countries are least likely to help you. Because like, it's all your fault, right? I suppose.
1 in 5. 1990, depression was the 4th most common cause of ill health. And a decade later, it was the 3rd biggest cause. And by 2010, depression had climbed to 2nd place. In 2017, the World Health Organization reported that the leading cause of ill health globally was no longer a somatic illness, but depression.
Yeah, but it's just not like arising from nowhere.
If we look at the anxiety disorders, which are divided into more diagnoses, we just put them together, they're actually on number 1, they are more frequent than even depression.
These are obviously astonishing numbers, but things get even weirder when we start comparing these results between high, middle, and low-income countries.
When we look at physical illnesses, the richer a country becomes, the lesser problems it has with different illnesses. But when we look at mental health problems, it's the reverse. For diagnoses such as generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, and psychotic episodes, the frequencies are more than twice as high in high-income nations as in low-income nations. So the richer a nation becomes, the higher levels of mental health problems we have.
This could make sense because, like, suppose you were the farmer guy who's just like, you know, eating potatoes, you know, have their house, have their farm. Like, you don't have much, but you don't have to worry about that much bullshit that we do have to worry about. PTSD, GAD.
These findings that mental health problems are more common.
Also, the world is very competitive, with little regard to those who lose out. I mean, your reason that you lost out in life because, like, let's say that something happened to you. You were like, I don't know, like sick, like high school or something or whatever, and that's it. You've fallen back and fallen behind in life, and now you're screwed. Or maybe like you wasted 1 year, but like boom, you're falling behind in life and something like that. So the world is pretty damn competitive, and I'm not disregarding humanity's competitive nature, but that is not all we are. Capitalism just takes possibly this selfish aspect of humanity and saying that that is all we are.
Common in high-income countries are also repeated in this major study called the Global Burden of Disease Study, despite the fact that this study uses different sources and other ways of analyzing the data.
All in all, what I really want to emphasize is that this social variation in mental health problems is one of the greatest mysteries in both medicine and social science right now.
It's not really a mystery, is it? You have to look at the variables in within people live.
One of the most common explanations is that of medicalization. That is the fact that we are making more and more normal states into medical conditions that should be diagnosed and treated. But the surveys...
And this could be double-edged because, like, suppose you live in a country, like I happen to be raised in a country that apparently is the unhappiest, at least in the Europe. And I'm not sure, like, depression was respected or at least recognized that much. But people definitely had it. So even if you don't diagnose it, that doesn't mean people don't have it. But I guess this could be double-edged because, like, then you might diagnose totally normal things or at least okay things that you don't need to pathologize, but you pathologize it because you want to discourage it. Like, you might see that, you know, ADHD is a disadvantage, or some aspect of it, something is a disadvantage, and you want to pathologize it because, like, you know, if some kid is like a little bit too active in the classroom, then they are wrong.
We've been discussing are formulated exactly to try to measure what's actually going on beyond the scope of psychiatric diagnosing. So they can't be explained away as easily as that. Another explanation is that of increasing inequality.
I'm not saying this to disregard someone who's like ADHD or something, but they could be overdiagnosing you because you don't fit in within a system.
There is strong evidence that inequality affects mental well-being.
In this graph, the horizontal axis sets out how unequal a country is, from low inequality to high inequality, and the vertical axis sets out the percentage of people in the country who suffer from mental health problems, from a low percentage to a high percentage. And if you start plotting out countries on this graph, you will soon start seeing an indisputable pattern. The more inequality a country has, the more its citizens suffer from mental health problems.
You have to keep in mind that not only those who are poor have it bad, and they truly have it bad. Don't think that, you know, this guy has like 1 million, this guy has like, you know, 20 million. It's not like that. This guy is living in these guys are underwater. You have to assume that these guys are underwater. They are in debt, and these guys maybe have it okay. So many of them are totally underwater, so that's not gonna help. And even in the middle, it's not gonna be that great. But also you have to keep in mind that when it comes to inequality, you need to also enforce it. So all those who have it high, all those who have better positions are not looking to exchange it and kind of looking to keep others down. So this guy is looking to keep everyone down. And they will sure act like it. You can see that when it comes to elections, 97%, at least the recent statistics, donations come from the 1%. Essentially, well, they always vote for their interest, or at least lobby for that.
Really important point. In countries with a lot of inequality, such as the US and the UK, everyone suffers more than in less unequal countries. Let me show you a graph.
I'm not sure it's everyone though, because those who are rich kind of have it good. So more people suffer. That would be.
UK, everyone suffers
I'm not sure this is okay. We'll see. More people suffer. That would be at least true.
more than in less unequal countries. Let me show you a graph that illustrates this. If we zoom in on the unequal countries and we look at the population in these countries from the poor to the rich, and we then measure how much social anxiety people have, then we see that the poor people have a lot of anxiety and the rich people, they have less anxiety. But
Yeah, that checks out.
and here's where it gets really interesting. If we zoom in on the less unequal countries, then we see that the rich people in unequal countries have almost as much social anxiety as the poorest people in the less unequal countries.
That's interesting. But also, being rich just means that you're far away from the lava, but you still see it, right? The only way to have any security is to get more. But you're still screwed in the poor countries as well. But they might help you, because apparently the most screwed countries are the individualistic ones, right? Where you could be the homeless person, and like, if you're a homeless person in America, they're thinking about how they can have you die as fast as possible, right? They're gonna put spikes everywhere, they try to drive you off, have the police to beat you up. That's pretty much it. If in other countries, or at least in some countries, you might face a more hospitable treatment. People might actually help you before you completely fall down.
One of the strongest, probably the strongest correlation,
Might help you up.
if we look at single variables and mental health, is that of loneliness. And here we see a dramatic increase
Maybe not out of their goodness of their heart, but like they might have more of a collectivist mindset that, you know, okay, I want to be helped up when I fall down. So I'm going to help those who do fall down, right? So we're going to be a little bit in it together.
increase in how people are living more and more on their own in one-person households, which actually are over 50% in nations such as Sweden. But we also see an increase in the subjective feelings of loneliness, with more and more people saying that they have no close friends.
That's interesting. Also, the act of having friends would greatly depends on your interests. So, for example, my age, or especially when I was younger, like you needed to like the things that most people like. I guess you can gain friends anywhere, sure. But if you just wanted to expose yourself to the most amount of friendships, then you need to like something like football and like, you know, video games, or like, I don't know, watching whatever random TV, and that probably would give you the greatest access to friends, right? Common interest. I largely don't have that. And also, just talking to people on the internet, I guess it's gonna be less engaging. You're watching a video of some guy watching a video, so it's not very social, is it? You're possibly watching it because you're feeling a little lonely. And I might be making this video because I'm feeling a little lonely. Who knows? That's a good question about loneliness. One for sure is that we spend more time alone because there are more activities that we can enjoy alone, and also there are more jobs too, because like programming could be like, you know, just programming 12 hours a day alone. That's it. You're gonna be okay with this. But that's gotta be more of a telling whether you can do a job, is that how social you are. So programming is not necessarily about how much you like math, but how much you can tolerate being alone.
In an American study, researchers asked people
If you're like, oh yeah, don't talk to me, I haven't talked to a person for like months, then yeah, you're gonna fit in just right.
how
I'm
many
not
close
suggesting that this is necessarily representative, but it's definitely more of a lonely ones.
friends they
Only
have.
one.
In 1985, the most common answer was 3 close friends. 20 years later, the most common answer was 0 close.
0. Like, it's gotta be up to the activities, because like you watch a YouTube video, that's not social. You watch a movie, that you might watch it with someone, but it's generally not social. You might play a video game, you might play it with other people, but like it's not really face to face. So there are more things to do that are not social, I guess. But also, in the past, it was not uncommon that, you know, some person they were born somewhere and they literally never moved away. They literally, their entire life, possibly never even traveled more than a few kilometers. What the fuck? Who's that person? And that is not the reality these days. So you might have to travel for school, and travel for work, and travel anyway, or just travel for fun. But if you do this kind of if you travel a lot, or at least even travel once in your life, then you're leaving behind all the people that you've come to know when you were growing up. And yeah, that's gonna affect you. And if you, let's say that you travel for work and you travel again, then again, you're kind of leaving them behind. Sure, you might make contact with them on the internet, but that's not necessarily face to face. So would that count as a close friend?
Close friends.
So there are some studies indicating that if you have no close friend, the likelihood that you will have depression is more than 50%. Another explanation, work and the changes in work, how much meaning
We're screwed.
we feel in work, has also changed dramatically. We've had a more than tenfold increase in productivity just during the 20th century. What that means is that what used to require 10 people can now be produced by just one person, and that's in Sweden and most of OECD nations. What that means is that
And no one cares. And when it comes to work, especially businesses, no one cares. You know, if they can have you just dig holes and bury them, like, they don't care about the effect on your mental health. Actually, you might not care about the effect on your mental health. Like, it makes me money, so I'm gonna do it, right? If I can work on my own, if you like it, that's all power to you. But if you don't like it and you still have to do it, you might be better off just looking for another job that is more suitable for you, because you're kind of going up against the wind.
is that in order to retain a stable level of employment, we have to invent new jobs. And these are jobs that earlier generations didn't need. Here we see a lot of indications that people are feeling a lack of meaning in what they are doing, a way of
Now, there are people who work like solo jobs, but they are not really solo people. They might spend like 1 hour working, but like they still like messaging people and like, oh my god, they're like, I'm kind of okay, I'm taking a break, I'm talking to my friends. Like those are very like warm, possibly social people, perhaps, but they're not exactly fit for the job.
measuring that is just to ask straight on, do you feel that you're making a meaningful contribution
In an office, they will be the ones who never do work, just talk to people.
in your job?
And in nations like the Netherlands and the UK, as many as around 40% answer no.
That, together with the fact that precarity is increasing, another factor is the consumption of screen time. There is a correlation between mental
Yeah,
well-being.
that's a good point. Also, like, yeah, companies don't really care, right? Whatever makes the money, right?
And how much time we spend looking at screens, but it's not a very strong correlation, and here we have to look more carefully into what we're actually doing on our screens. Another explanation is that of
It kind of depends on whether you consider talking to someone online as a close friend. I might say it could be acceptable, right? But it kind of depends on what kind of interaction it is, I suppose.
the mean world syndrome, the fact that our news tend to focus on negative events.
We have so much information from all around the world. It seems as if the world is falling apart. There's a war here, terrible environmental disaster there. Everybody hates each other, and you get kind of depressed.
Less debated that
It can be debated that the news is too positive. But that would be truly depressing.
variable is that of how far we're looking into the future, so-called time horizon.
Because the news might focus on things that are negative, but not the main issue, which could be even more depressing. I guess that's my point.
We have this Buddhist mantra that if you're living in the present, here and now, feelings of anxiety and worry will just go away. And I think that's true to some extent, but I don't think we've always had the necessity to do a lot of meditation in order to reach that sort of presence.
But you cannot afford to be in the present, right? More than ever, you gotta be the guy who's like thinking 200 years ahead.
And here we can see historically that how far into the future we're thinking has really increased. So if we go
And it might not be driven by desire, right? You might not be like, oh yeah, this is my flight of fancy. Like, that would be so cool. I'm gonna be like a space pirate or something. Maybe not, but you're thinking ahead in the future out of fear, out of anxiety. You're like, oh my god, yeah. We're gonna like think at least 20 years ahead, or it's gonna be GG.
go far back, if we go to the hunter-gatherers, and we know this from a lot of anthropological studies, they did not think that far into the future. In fact, they had to repeat the same way of living almost every day in order to gather everything they needed in order to survive. When we have agriculture, you have to plan several years ahead. And when we develop technology
You have to use a good choice of words here.
further, and we have nuclear power and nuclear waste, we have to plan 100,000 years into the future and see, well, how should we take care of this waste? So what this does is to offer more space for us to worry about the future and to calculate risks and think about other things that might go wrong.
Also, people are not that good at calculating that far. I can calculate that far. Really. I mean, you can't really plan that far. Like, you might make a plan, or at least I make a plan, and like, first step is like, okay. Second step is like, oh, it's kind of iffy. Thing is, you cannot really plan that far ahead. The more you almost have to give up plans, because the other plans are gonna fall apart. Maybe like our first few steps are gonna be fine, but then it completely falls apart. So it's rough. So there are no insurances anyway. So you can say like, yeah, I plan further ahead in the future, but doesn't mean that you can. You can't, right? And you have to accept the reality that, yeah, you might plan, but it's really not up to you, right? But maybe some people, like some dream that they're gonna be like an artist, and now AI exists. Boom, artist jobs are pretty much done. The plan is gone. Like, they probably planned that they're gonna be like a big artist by 2030 or something. Is that gonna be still true? The plan changes. Even if you consider all the variables, which you almost certainly have not.
On an individual level, it might be very important to accept that now I have feelings of anxiety, now I have feelings of depression, and that might actually be a strong way of countering these emotions. But on a societal level, we don't have to accept that people are feeling more and more anxiety, more and more depression. On a society level, we should really think about, is there anything we can do about this? And not rely on that economic growth will just solve it automatically, because clearly it is not.
I am Andres Acevedo, and this is The Market Exit, my YouTube channel where I publish short